Hi, I'm Felicity, registered nurse, cosmetic injector, and founder of the Fit Injector Clinic. Welcome to my channel and video podcast streaming on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Today is episode 3, and I have fellow cosmetic injector and business owner joining me. Welcome, Chris.
Hi.
Chris is the owner of Novaeus Aesthetics. Today, we're going to be chatting about the business side of introducing skin treatments into a cosmetic injectables clinic, choosing a laser and light-based device, and the process of researching, deciding, and purchasing those devices, and advice we have for other small business owners who are looking to add skin treatments into their clinic. So some really exciting topics.
Let's do it.
Let's get started. But first, Chris, tell us a bit about yourself.
So as you mentioned already, I am the owner of Novaeus Aesthetics. I've been in aesthetics for the last 4.5 years. I've been a registered nurse for 14 years.
14, that's amazing.
Yeah, time flies, right?
It does.
Yeah.
So 4 years as a cosmetic injector and then 14 as a registered nurse. So what have you been doing? I know you also are still working in the hospital system as well, but tell us a little bit about that and also what you were doing prior to becoming an injector.
So my clinical background's in intensive care. So I was a clinical nurse specialist in ICU for about 8 years, and I've worked in a variety of roles. So everything from education to management roles. I lived and worked in London, where I was in operational management roles.
That's impressive.
Moved back to Sydney, and that's how I started injecting. And so I still do work in the hospital in an after hours manager role. So managing the facility after hours, and I have the perfect balance of a little bit of hospital and the injecting, which I love.
Yeah, you sure do. And tell us a little bit about your transition into injectables. What was the motivator there to get into it, or was it like something in particular happened?
I think it was more about why I didn't get into injecting for a long time. My mum always was encouraging me to do it.
Your mum, I love it.
And she's in the industry herself. And I always had this view that people who have these treatments look unnatural.
Yes.
Of course, because that's a lot of the work that we notice out there is the work that's perhaps not
we
done
notice
very
the bad
well.
stuff, right?
Yeah.
We don't notice the good stuff. We just think people look good.
And that's been my treating ethos, if you like, is about achieving natural results and helping people look and feel their best, which sounds a bit corny, but
it's true.
Look good, feel good, those things are both related.
Yeah, and you definitely preach that on your social media, and I love that. And you really speak to that natural result and how that can be achieved. I really like that.
Thank you.
That's good. And tell us where you're located, because you have a few locations.
Yes, so I started off injecting here in Sydney in Darlinghurst, and my partner and I, we decided to make the move up to Cessnock. So we bought a house there, and we were planning to live in Newcastle, and sort of just everything just fell into place. And I opened my clinic just after COVID lockdown ended.
Yes.
And going great.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well done. And I'm sure that I love, talking to people that are in the sort of smaller areas as opposed to the big cities, and mentoring people in those areas, which I've done. And I love it because you've got this demand for services, but limited services as well. So I think it's amazing what you're doing up there, and I think you'll continue to do really well.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's kick it off with our first topic, which is talking about introducing skin treatments and devices into a cosmetic injectables clinic. So a huge part of the cosmetic market is one man, one woman, one person cosmetic injector businesses like you and I. And going on this transition of you are a small business, but you want these devices, which, we often see in, much bigger clinics. And I guess where that point is that, it suits our businesses and what we're looking for. So let's speak to sort of where we were both at before we started introducing these treatments. So for Chris, you were obviously like injectables and then going into this. Did you start with skin treatments when you opened your business as well? Did you have any?
So I started off purely with injectables.
Yeah, as most injectors do.
No skincare, nothing. And very quickly I realised that what I really wanted to achieve required more than just injectables.
Definitely.
And that's where the whole interest, if you like, came with skin health.
Totally.
So first step for me was introducing a skincare line. And in fact, I think I had probably tried maybe 8 different skincare brands.
Yeah.
And I've brought in another skincare brand about 6 months ago, and I feel like it's exactly where I wanted to be.
It's the one.
Years ago.
Yeah.
It's the one. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, that's fantastic. And for those of you watching and listening who don't know, my journey as a cosmetic injector actually started in a clinic where it was like skin treatments first and devices first. Right. It's kind of injectables second. So then when I opened my business, I didn't have the means to have devices and things like that, but I started with cosmetic injectables, really basic skin peels, and a really basic LED light therapy device as well. And then from there I grew to getting more and more treatments, and then now just recently purchasing my first laser-based device.
Yeah.
So, and I guess for both of us, we can speak to these people, starting off small injectables only or just a little bit of skin. And like you just touched on, the importance of introducing these, because, our injectables are great, but we can really enhance our patients' results if we're providing them with skincare, skin treatments, all these other things. And from a business perspective, also having those patients, who love us for injectables, we don't then want them going, I guess, to other clinics to have their skin treatments. We want to be able to service all their needs in one place for their skin.
That's right. And yeah, exactly. You hit the nail on the head there. You want as many reasons for people to come back and, experience a range of services.
Yeah.
And, I think skin health is so important. And like we've just touched on, injectables are great, but that's really, a lot of that is addressing what's going on underneath the skin. And yeah, what is better than healthy, luminous skin?
Yeah, it's what everyone wants, right? Yeah, totally. So let's then talk about we'll start touching on our experiences of then going, okay, as a business owner, I'm ready to start introducing devices. And I guess let's just dive straight into this feeling of being pressured, this kind of feeling of being sold to. Other business owners will probably be nodding their head as we talk about this, and maybe, helpful for consumers to know as well. Like, there is just so much choice out there, and you kind of feel like as soon as you start contacting these companies, I certainly felt it initially, this kind of pressure to just sort of go with that and not sort of taking that time to go, what's the best decision for me? So I definitely felt, and the experience I'll give to start with is when the first thing I wanted to invest in, I had this tiny little, like I said, LED device when I was renting one room in Wallara. And then when I opened my, my clinic in Edgecliff, I then wanted like a proper medical grade LED device. And so I contacted a few of the big name companies, and I was firstly shocked by the price, as I literally just opened my business. I did not have the funds to be buying a device like that. And what I felt was it was the conversation was sort of like, it's fine, you'll pay this off in no time, you'll have this running all day. But in reality, I'm sitting there saying, I'm not going to have this running all day. I'm a one-woman show. I'm introducing this to be pretty much a add-on complementary treatment, something I add value to all my other treatments. And 99% of the time, I'm not the plan wasn't to charge people for it. It was to add this on. So I'm adding value to my services. And I'm saying I'm not going to have this running at, X amount of dollars per treatment all day, every day. And I'm like, look around you, like I'm the only staff member, I don't have multiple rooms. And I just felt like, and this was a conversation that happened with multiple companies. And I just felt like I would have been losing sleep over how much I'd spent on this device, and B, that I was not planning on charging people 90% of the time for these treatments, and that I wouldn't be making a return on investment on it.
And I think you've touched on two points there. And I think firstly, the world of aesthetics is constantly evolving. Yes. And with that comes lots of new technology coming onto the market. And, with that, there's things that trend and there's things that that are lasting. Yes. So I think that's the first thing. And secondly, the financial investment, we're pretty much, to do this properly, you are constantly hemorrhaging money.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's really, you really need to do your due diligence with purchasing any device. Yeah,
totally. And don't just speak with one company. Really do your research, because there's so much out there. And if I hadn't done my research, I would be sort of I would have spent all this money that I actually couldn't afford, and I would probably still be struggling with repayments on these devices.
And that's the thing. I think when it comes to doing your research, I mean, absolutely, speak to the companies, speak to all the companies that, that have what it is that you're looking for. But I think first and foremost, really know what your purpose is. Yes. Know what it is, what it is that your clients are wanting. What are their concerns that you're not able to address with your current services?
Yes.
So definitely. That's where I started.
Perfect.
Is, opening in Cessnock, a lot of what I was seeing was, solar pigmentation and redness. So for me, that was my driving force with finding a treatment that was going to address those concerns.
And you spent so much time listening to your clients, assessing their skin and making that decision on what is the best thing, instead of just going, oh yeah, that looks good, we'll get that. And then trying to sort of go, okay, all your clients, come on, you all want this treatment. And they're like, oh, we don't want that treatment. That doesn't speak to our concerns. So you definitely not only did your research with the companies, you did your research on what your clients wanted as well.
And I tried the devices out. I pretty much had sort of 6-month blocks where I would try a device. I would, book myself into various clinics and have a treatment, and just to see, what is the treatment like? Yeah. Does it hurt?
Yeah.
What's the downtime? Yeah. And what is the result?
And that's the thing. And we need to truly believe in these treatments and that we are getting the results, and trying them for ourselves is so important, because then the first thing our patients say to us is, are you doing it? Does it hurt? What's the downtime? And what are the results like? And we need to be able to go, yes, I've done this multiple times, and I'm so happy with the results, and I'm happy to bring this into you.
And I think, again, another important point which sort of filters into trust. My clients, they trust the advice I'm giving. They know that I'm not here to push treatments onto them just for the sake of getting as much money as I can out of them. And that's really so important.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about what we observe in the industry from, fellow injectors and things. And we see these, as we talk about, one injector shows who only do injectables, and like you spoke about, and it would have been, say, like you and I at the start, then jumping into buying these really expensive devices. So they go from just injectables to this super expensive device, but they don't actually know, like you just spoke about, whether they've even got the client demand to be able to service that device, and whether people are actually even going to be interested in it. And I guess what I want to talk about is that a lot of these companies, if you do shop around, you can get like what I'd like to say maybe call like an entry-level device for starters. You don't have to kind of go for their big fandangle device to start. You can certainly work towards that and have that as your goal. That's amazing. But there are other fantastic devices that you can start with that are going to be much better for you and your business and your clients, and also have that little bit of a transition like you did. You introduced the skincare first, right? And you started to get your clients interested in their skin. I introduced LED and peels, PRP, skin needling, the medical grade facials, radio frequency, all these other things before I then invested in a laser device. So I knew by that point that I was like, I have a gap with what I actually can't service my clients with. And now I need to invest in that because I've got all my other bases covered. So I'm kind of saying there's like, you can do this as like a stepping stone process instead of kind of going from like 0 to 100 and then being like, oh, what do I do with this device? So I obviously, mentor others, on this as well around like their cost options and listening to your client base, making sure you've got the demand, not over extending yourself. And also a big one is working with a company that aligns with your needs. Like, do they listen to you, and what can they do for you as well? They're working for you, you're not working for them. So what can this company do for you, and how can they support your business? And we'll talk a little bit more as we go around like training and support and what you're getting with this device as well. Because it's all very well and good to get that device, but are you going to be really confident in how to use it as well? So second sort of head topic is actually choosing the device. Now, I want you to share with us some of your experiences of your researching, deciding and purchasing phase, because you had some crazy deliberation over this, and we had some pretty intense phone calls that was like kind of in tears, kind of laughing, kind of a bit of a roller coaster. I have probably lost track of how many phone conversations we had when we were going through this, but give us a bit of insight into this process for you.
I started looking into light and laser-based technology about 2 years ago, and it was overwhelming. So initially I tapped into my own sort of network to see what friends and colleagues, what devices they have. Of course, went to a few demonstrations and a few events run by the company. I was all set to buy a laser. That was...
At one point, two. You called me at one point and you're
like,
I think I want to, and I was like, slow.
No, but I still want that other device.
Oh yeah, and there's another one I want as well. But at one point you were like, I think I'll buy two at once. And I'm like, no, let's just take a breath.
Yeah, I know. Everything all at once. But and that was crazy.
Yeah.
I still
Don't recommend it, but yeah.
I still do want
and
a
that's
CO2
fantastic.
laser.
Yeah.
But,
and have that goal,
But importantly, it's just sort of deciding what your pathway is to deciding what your endpoint is first and the pathway to get there.
Absolutely.
So for me, up in Cessnock, I often have patients come through my clinic door who don't have a skincare routine. They aren't aware of what it is they actually need. They're open to finding out what it is that they actually need.
Good.
Some people think skincare is just a big gimmick, and I don't blame them, because there is just Kim Kardashian, she's got
everyone's
skincare.
doing it.
You've got,
and also how many people are like, oh yeah, I went to these places and I was sold to these ranges that they were like, I didn't even know how to use it.
Yeah. And again, it's all about sort of noticeable results.
Yeah.
So the current skincare I've got, everyone comes back.
Loving
even
it.
after a little sample, I give out a sample pack.
I do the same.
And they come back. I've been so surprised. They'll come back in a few days. I mean, really with skincare, it's about, consistency, right? But even after a few days, they're coming back. So for me, that's that's what I want for them. I want people to be able to notice results.
And people who want to come back to tell you how good the skincare was or how good the treatment was, and that you've completely exceeded their expectations.
Yeah. And again, it's that builds that trust.
Yeah.
So, yes, I want the CO2 laser.
Of course you do.
I do want it. But for me, I knew that there were very limited options in the area that I service with regard to light and laser-based technology. People weren't necessarily, on the whole, they weren't experienced with this type of technology.
Yeah.
So therefore, you know, rather than, hey, come in and have a full ablative laser resurfacing with, you know, several days of downtime.
That's intense. Yeah.
That wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
So it was really about that, like you said, an entry-level device, which is still, you know,
amazing.
and significant financial investment.
Yes.
To get people used to having these treatments.
Totally. And a little bit you touched on there, I think it's a good thing for us to raise, is kind of like your demographic of patients. Because I certainly find here in the eastern suburbs, like years ago when, like I said, I got all my experience at a clinic that was very much skin and device focused. And it was very normal all day, every day we're doing these deep ablative lasers on people who like take a week off to recover. But I feel like things are quite different these days as well. And I feel like being right here in Bondi Junction is people want the treatments, they want the results, but they don't want downtime. They're like, what do you mean I've got to have downtime? So for me, I certainly want one of those devices down the track, but the reason I went for the one I've got, which is very similar technology to what you've got, is the fact that I could treat all these things that my patients are wanting, that gap in the market that I had, that I wasn't able to service, but I can do it without the downtime. And for them, they're just like, great, anything without downtime, I'm here for it. Yeah. So what about for you in Cessnock? Is people quite similar, like they're not wanting the downtime, or they just don't have the education around these treatments?
Look, I've got there is a bit of a range.
Yeah.
On the whole, people in general, they want to be quite discreet about even coming into the clinic.
Yeah, totally.
I have
stigma around.
I have someone who wants to jump over the back fence to come in. So
I've got these images of someone texting you like just jumping over.
Truly, we're over that now. She comes through
like hiding
the front entrance now. But so I think downtime. I know, right?
I love it.
They don't want downtime.
That's a thing.
And really there are options with with the device I have. These you can modify the settings. You can customize that to what it is the client needs and wants. So
and and they can be out the door, and they can put their makeup on the next day and feel like they're not having this extended downtime, which they love, and still getting a really good result.
That's
as well.
It. And for their first treatment, a lot of the skin type, Fitzpatrick skin type I see is probably 1 and 2.
Yes.
For the most part. And so the first session will be sort of, won't be going too hard in the first session, just to see how they tolerate it. People are a little bit sort of, unsure of what to expect. So
yeah. And definitely through this process, as I said, we've gone ahead with very similar devices. The technology has come such a long way that these devices used to be quite painful. If you ever had it years ago, it was pretty intense. Yeah. But these days they have such incredible cooling, and they have this function called in motion, which actually is such a comfortable treatment. Like my patients are just like laying there so comfortable saying, I feel like it's, there's really nothing even, happening to my skin. They just feel this sort of light warmth and they can see the light. But other than that, they just look like they're having a little nap. So they're loving it from that perspective, because obviously pain tolerance is a big thing, and a lot of our patients don't have a high pain tolerance. So being able to provide a treatment that's really comfortable is a big one for me as well. Yeah. So let's now talk about advice that we have for other small business owners tuning in. You've got this overwhelming, rapidly growing industry with so much choice, but kind of limited resources on kind of who you speak to. Who do you get advice from in kind of like a neutral way from someone who's not trying to like sell you something or, you know, persuade you in some way? Like, where do you turn for that? So I guess the main things are around like shopping around, which we've touched on, not buying the first device that you see, trying lots of devices, and you were so big on that, and trying them yourself, and speaking to other business owners about it as well and about their journeys of buying as well. And negotiating. So let's talk about this one. So when we're talking about negotiating with these devices, we're talking about the price, we're talking about the terms, and we're talking about warranties, training, and support. Yeah. So tell us a little bit of insight about those things.
Yeah. So again, I think the first thing to be aware of, just back to your point on advice.
Yes.
So this is something that, I found very interesting. Be aware of who you are getting advice from. You know, some people, you know, are naturally, you know, just drinking the Kool-Aid, and you know, they're very invested in one particular company.
Yeah.
And that's probably not ever going to be me. And that's okay. But just be aware of who you're getting advice from, and really try and get some advice from someone who is completely independent.
Yes.
So, which I appreciate, you know, everyone's experience is based on, you know, with these technologies, based on the devices they've got.
Yes.
So I guess it's just sort of saying to be aware of that.
Yeah. And talking to multiple people, I guess, who've got, you know, different devices. They might have one range, they might have multiple, and I guess pulling all the best bits from all of them.
I've even messaged people on Instagram.
Sliding into their DMs.
Yeah, absolutely. That are in like America. People that, you know, I don't know and they don't know me.
Well, that's a great way to get a very like neutral, you know, piece of advice.
Yeah. And so I think from asking a variety of different people from, you know, a whole group of people got a particular device, you just get as much feedback as you can.
Yeah.
And what I was finding is that there were sort of quite a few people saying the same thing. And you kind of think, well, okay, you kind of see a trend in the information that you're getting, which, you know, might be sort of most accurate, I guess.
Yes. And you were obviously getting very positive, you know, feedback around the device that you were leaning towards, which was great.
Yeah.
And so was I.
Yeah.
Definitely a company that I will work with in the future.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, you know, we both made a really good choice for our businesses.
Yeah, I'm definitely, and we made a different choice.
We chose choice.
We went with different companies.
Yeah.
And that's what I like as well, is that, you know, we were discussing, you know, deliberating is probably the better word.
Definitely deliberating.
You know, what we were going to choose. And at the end we went with different companies.
Yeah. So negotiating. So let's talk about the price, the terms, warranty, training and support. So a lot of things that people sort of don't like think about. And there were some things that like you would flag with me and I would flag with you. And then I've since, even yesterday, I had one of our fellow injectors asking me about devices and I mentioned to them, you know, check about the warranty. And that was something that hadn't occurred to her yet. And she's like, oh, great, I'll go back and check that. So let's speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I think first of all, trigger word there was warranty.
Trigger warning.
And I think the big thing there, I mean, that's probably the struggle I had, was understanding why it is that you can spend tens of thousands of dollars, even more than $200,000.
Like, can we just say like as much as like a house deposit for some of these
pretty
devices?
Big house
like
deposit
a Sydney
too.
house deposit.
Yeah, okay, yeah, sure. And, you know, I mean, look, how much warranty do you get for a car?
Well, this is actually a great example, and my husband will love that I've pulled this one in. So just before we had our daughter, so just over a year ago, we purchased a brand new Land Cruiser, Toyota Land Cruiser, and we get a 7-year warranty on that. Is that correct? 7 years? Yes. And it is half the price of, like, say, the price you just mentioned for one of the devices. So I could have 2 Land Cruisers for the price of one of these laser devices. 7-year warranty. The laser device, I was being offered a 1-year warranty.
Yeah. And that's, I think that seems to be standard. But
Yes.
again, you know, we need to question these things.
And you can negotiate that.
Absolutely.
And with one company, I had negotiated 2 years on a device, and I was much happier with that. My concern around a 1-year warranty is I've barely even made any of those repayments. And what if something is going wrong with my device?
Yeah, you haven't got return on investment.
Exactly.
And I think you and I were really on the same page there, is that we both pretty much said at the same time, you know, like, if a company is giving a 12-month warranty, what does that say about the confidence they have in their device?
Nailed it. Absolutely. And how does that give us confidence in what happens in the future? Are we just going to have this device in our clinics that we're paying off and there's something wrong with it and we're not getting that support? So really make sure you're checking that in your contracts.
Definitely.
And then training and support. So something for me when I was doing my research was that, you know, like you mentioned, paying, you know, a lot for these devices, a very short warranty, and then also being told that, and this was on multiple counts with multiple companies, that the training would just be like a 1-day training. And then after that, if I wanted more training, I would be paying for that training at an additional cost to me. Whereas I was more drawn to companies that it was like the training sort of unlimited. You know, you're getting as much training and support. And when I'm bringing a new device into my clinic and I'm learning on it and my staff are learning on it, I want to know that we can really lean on that supplier to be providing that ongoing training. And that's something to factor in to these repayments is additional training as well.
And that's the thing, you know, it's great to have all these devices, but I think the magic comes with, you know, the operator knowing how to get the most out of that device to get the best results. And, you know, I think my question to you is, you know, the example you just gave of a company that said you would get 1 training day and then it would be, you know, a certain amount for further training. Was that quite, were they open and upfront about that, or did you have to sort of probe?
I had to filter through the contract to find that. And then I was quite shocked to see that. And then I had to bring it up. And it was sort of then a little bit kind of wish-washy about that because I flagged that I wasn't happy with that. And then that was then something that I was then trying to negotiate to have more training included.
And look, that just doesn't sit well with me at all. I think that, you know, even, you know, in my business, you know, my price is my price. But I am always honest and upfront about that.
Exactly.
You know, there's a price guide on my website. I'm not trying to lure people into my clinic through, you know, example, you know, anti-wrinkle, you know, $99. I mean, it's just not something I'll ever advertise. But that's a whole other podcast.
We could do another episode.
You know,
but and like you're probably like me. I've never drawn up any anti-wrinkle or opened a syringe of filler without having a price conversation with a patient.
Absolutely, it's important.
Yeah.
So one example I've got, just with regard to the training that's given with the purchase of a device, was a quote I received for a particular device, and training was highlighted as being a few $1,000s for which they were giving 100% discount on. Now, look, I think that was a bit cheeky.
That's very cheeky.
Would you honestly sell someone a device and not show them how to use it? So I guess from, you know, my message to you all is that having training is should be a very basic expectation.
Yes.
And I don't really see that as a value add as such.
No, it should be included in the purchase price, included in that service. Because like you said, what are you supposed to do with a device that, you're meant to like YouTube it or something like that? That's not safe for our patients.
Makes no sense. But
very cheeky.
Very. And I think with negotiating as well, look, you just be aware of certain times of the year where, you may have a little more ability, a little more room to move with various companies, particularly end of financial year and end of year as well.
End of year. And also, hot tip, which I only learnt last year actually, is a lot of these companies are at the Beauty Expo. And I didn't realize they do amazing deals and packages at the expo. And I actually went along as a model for a company last year, no intention to buy, walked out with 3 new things, 2 devices and a trolley for a device. And because I didn't realize that, that's a great time to buy. So advice to business owners, end of financial year, end of year, and buy a ticket to the Beauty Expo.
Great. And so with that as well, I mean, look, you may not be able to negotiate on the price of the device, but certainly look for additional value.
Yeah, the inclusions. Yeah, and really go through those contracts with a fine-tooth comb.
Yeah, and whether that's, training, whether it's treatment packs, if there's an option for that.
Yeah.
And on training, really go over that and really have an understanding of what the training schedule is and what is the option for you if it is 1 training session, 2 training sessions. What is the option then if you aren't happy?
Yeah, like what if you don't feel confident after 1 training session? Yeah.
So, the company I went with, that was something that I already knew they do really well.
They do.
And, it was flexible to meet my needs.
Yeah.
And ultimately their goal is to make sure, I'm in clinic using the device safely and achieving the results because,
well, it's in their best interest.
And that's exactly it. That is key. And then
if you have a good experience, you're going to be preaching that to, fellow business owners that come to you. You're going to be saying, look, I've had a really good experience with this company. So it's totally in their best interest.
100%. And even in the short time that we've had our devices, I've put, a little bit it has been on social media. I've had quite a few people asking my opinion and
well, people are going to turn to you now.
And I will always be really honest about this and
that's definitely
because I want to help people.
Exactly.
We've just had so much back and forth and so much deliberation about what device we were going to go for, and if I can help someone else, then great.
Totally. Because we wish that there was a lot more available when we were trying to make these decisions.
Definitely.
I guess, and another thing I'll touch on here is a question I do get asked a lot when other business owners, reach out to me about these devices. And this did come up yesterday. I was at an injectables workshop and people were talking about devices, and they did mention you and your new device and me, and were sort of asking questions. And one was around payment options. And I think a good thing to know is that, yes, you can pay up front, but you can also do payment plans for these. So the question was, can I do a payment plan for that? So people often don't, sort of realize that you can do that there's lots of options around that as well to make it, better for your business.
Yeah. And I think that's, I guess with payment plans, again, I know many friends, colleagues who have bought the, the device that is the few $100,000 and they're struggling with the repayments and
which is awful.
How long before they will see return on investment. Well, one person I'm thinking of, she predicts probably 5 or 6 years before she's paid off a device.
Yeah. And that's a lot of stress as a small business owner. Yeah.
And I think, the lessons of COVID have taught us that, really consider what your overheads are And,
Absolutely.
that's something that I've factored in. I
Yeah.
mean,
Thank God you didn't buy 2 devices.
well, exactly. I know, right?
And also, people's spending habits are changing as well since COVID, and we've got these interest rate changes as well. So we also have to factor in that people might, change. They might say, I can only factor in my anti-wrinkle this month. I can't factor in my skin treatments as well. So, having all these things that you're paying off, are you actually going to be able to, meet those repayments too?
And that's it. And, generally, I mean, the more expensive the device, the more expensive the treatment as well. So definitely lots of different things that need to be factored.
Yeah, totally. And I guess to kind of like on the flip side of that, the amount of people or patients who've asked me over the years, will you ever do like hair removal or something, right? And you see all, it advertised, $10 underarms and things like that. But I think from a consumer perspective, they don't realize, like, for us to introduce that, we would be spending a couple of $100,000 on a device to do $10 underarms. And that's something as a small business, I can't justify that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too, it comes down to stripping things back to sort of, saying, what is my purpose? What am I trying to achieve here?
Yeah.
So I think, just being really purposeful and not just going out buying every bit of
everything
technology
that
that you can.
And you get caught up, right? You go to conferences and things, you're like, oh wow, that looks great. And you do a demo and sort of get caught up on these things. But you've really just got to slow it down and go, what is achievable for me, and what do my patients actually want and need?
Yeah. 100%. And, I went to a device demonstration yesterday, and, the person doing the demonstration, I was having it, experiencing the treatment, and, he said, how is it? I was like, I actually loved it.
Yeah.
And, me being me,
today, by the way.
Thank you. I wasn't going to just say, no, I didn't love it.
Yeah.
And, I was really excited by the potential of bringing that treatment into clinic.
Definitely.
But, did I sign then and there?
No.
No. I need to,
Just
have a
wait.
think about it. And, I mean, I did try and negotiate.
Yeah, good.
Price, but
you
that
are like
was
the king of negotiating.
Well, I actually don't feel that I'm very
But I
good at
feel
it.
like you were, because when we were both deliberating, you'd be calling me and you're like, have you negotiated this? I'm like, oh no, okay, all right, I'll do that.
Yeah.
And you were sort of really pushing me in a good way
Yeah.
to be a bit more kind of pushy with that. So I would say you are.
Yeah. Well, it didn't work for me
didn't work.
yesterday. But look, I think, if you, again, back onto price, if you can't negotiate the price down at all, then just, as I said, look for, for added value.
Yes. Yeah. What can you negotiate with the inclusions?
Yeah. And don't be desperate.
No.
Like I always say, well, I do. I say this to my partner all the time. We're looking for, investment property at the moment.
Yeah.
And, we just say, good things don't come out of desperate places.
Exactly.
You really have got to think of what your long-term prospects are. And, when you are investing tens of thousands or, a few $100,000, you want to know that there is that long-term prospect with the device.
Absolutely. So important. And then coming into this, we have touched on this, but like, do you plan to run your device all day long? Do you have staff to run this device? And do you have the space for it as well? If you've got this tiny one-room clinic, a lot of people might not realize these devices some of them are huge. So do you have the space for that? And like it speaks back to that first example when I was first looking at bringing in an LED machine, is that I didn't have staff at that point. So you've got to think, especially when the majority of your business is cosmetic injectables, you're not also going to be running this device all day. So you have to be okay in your head with like how many treatments you would do, say, per day or per week. And is that going to be enough to justify these devices?
And is it going to impact on the injecting side of your business? If you are the one-man band, which I am at the moment, you were not until long ago.
Up until 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's really about sort of, who's going to be doing it?
Yeah.
And, I had several companies say to me, this treatment's great. You're going to be doing this all day, every day. And I'm looking at them thinking, I don't want to be doing this all day, every day.
Key, I don't want to be doing this all day, every day.
Yeah. And
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, as we've touched on, starting with, those lower investment options, but fantastic to get our patients on board. So we've touched on retail range of skincare, chemical peels, skin needling, PDO threads, PRP, fantastic, LED as well, and launching these into your business first before you go to those bigger laser and light-based devices.
Or you might decide that you don't have a need for
exactly,
those.
And there's
there's so many options.
There are so many options, and that's definitely what I speak to. Like when I mentor, other injectors, is I say start with one of those options I just listed, and you might find that's all you need to add on to your business. Especially like I spoke about before, if you're renting, a lot of us started renting like a 1-room clinic, you do not have space for these treatments as well. These big devices.
Well, and that's very much where I'm at. Every time Tom hears me talking about a new device, he's like, where is this going to fit? Where is this going?
And when we spoke on the phone the other day, I was like, how's your clinic? You're like, it's getting a bit squishy.
Yeah. He's like, how much does it cost? That's the first thing. And then I feel like I've got to sell it to him.
You got to have your PowerPoint presentation, right?
I've always got that good to go.
Where's the house deposit money going?
Yeah. It's into devices, right? And, physical space, like you said.
It's massive. Even now, like I have a 5-room clinic that we're sitting in right now. And even like myself and my nurse Ellen, we're constantly going, oh, this room's got too many devices in it, move it into the next room, move this one in and out. And I'm thinking I could do with having an entire room just to store my devices now, because I'm up to like 6 devices now, and I should have factored in a room just to store them. Yeah.
No more devices.
No, I know. No, I'm on a ban now. No more. So let's move on to some of the questions. So a few days ago, we both put up on our Instagram the little question box for our followers to submit some questions. So I've picked, I think, about 5 or 6 questions here. So the first one is, what treatments and devices do you both have in your clinics right now? So you go first. Tell us what you've got.
So obviously injectables, and really my light-based technology, my energy-based device, they are the 2 avenues I've got. And of course working on a few other possibilities.
Before we jumped on, we were talking about the next investment, of course.
Definitely. I will tell you it's skin health related.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love it.
Not telling anymore.
That's it. And I've obviously got, for those of you who are watching and listening that don't know, obviously cosmetic injectables, PRP, skin needling, chemical peels, 2 LEDs, a medical grade facial treatment, radio frequency skin tightening, and photofacial BBR.
How did I forget PRP?
I know, because I was
an
saying
underrated treatment. Yeah, I absolutely do.
It's one
PRP.
of my favourite treatments, especially coupled with the skin needling and a bit of LED. Love it. Yeah, because I thought you did too.
Yeah, and I do have started doing skin peels. I just haven't promoted it.
Yeah, but it's so good to have. Yeah, fantastic. So next question is, what would you recommend to an injector just starting out in their business but wanting to offer skin treatments?
That's an interesting one, because I had lots of advice that said skin needling, start with skin needling.
Yeah.
Now, truth be told, I bought a skin needling device, the most expensive skin needling device.
Of course you did.
And I had it for a year.
Yeah.
Lots of people are a fan of skin needling. I found the results to be underwhelming. Yeah. And I sold it after 12 months.
Did you?
So, so I went straight for an energy-based device.
Great.
So, and that's what I've got now. And look, I'm happy with my choice. Totally. And I'm happy because my patients are seeing results.
Yeah. And that's the main thing. Next question is, what would be a good device to start with, and what are the payment options?
What do you think about this one?
So if we're talking, say, someone who's, just getting started into this, I think like we've touched on, maybe introducing skincare, chemical peels, things like that. If you're wanting to start with a device, maybe something like LED or like we talked about, like an entry-level laser device. And we have, we've probably answered most of this question. We've talked about, yes, you can pay up front and you can also do payment plans for these devices as well. Yeah. But I guess it just depends on, listen to your patients and take time listening to them. And in your consults, really talking about, what are your skin concerns? And just keeping those mental notes, or even keep physical notes on what are people talking about: redness, pigmentation, skin rejuvenation. Like, what are they talking about? And kind of keep a tally. And then that can guide you as to what you should be investing in.
And that's key. I think it's great to get advice, but, the advice various people will be giving, it will be based on their experience.
Yes.
And so I think if you really always take it back to, keeping it sort of client focused, what are people skin concerns?
Exactly.
And, what are you trying to achieve?
Yeah.
So because just because, skin peels and needling have worked for someone else, it doesn't mean that it's the right choice for you. And that is, super important.
Totally. And leading up to the purchase of my latest device, the Photofacial BBR, was I had a lot of patients saying, with everything else, they're like, my skin looks great, I've got no lines, no wrinkles, loving it, but it's the redness that concerns me, or it's the pigment. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is where I'm not able to service my patients now. And that's exactly what I got that device for, because it treats redness, broken capillaries, pigmentation, acne scarring, overall skin rejuvenation. And now, even thinking about a patient I had on the bed last week, they're like, because they've been doing, anti-wrinkle and courses of peels and LEDs, and skin's looking great. But they said to me, I just want to get on top of this redness. They said, my breakouts don't concern me anymore. You've got that under control. You've got my wrinkles under control, but this redness through my cheeks. And I was like, I can help you now. And now we've started the course of the BBR, the photofacial, for the redness. It's really cool.
It's great, if you do have clients who actually see that as being important, and I say to some of my patients, it's like having a luxury brand new car, but it's filthy. Like you give it a wash, take it to the car wash, and that that lovely car is even better. And it's just the same principle with skin.
So good. We love our car analogies,
Yeah.
don't we? So good. The next question's a good one. So you both use different brands for, this is referring to our recent purchases. How did you each decide what was right for your clinic? So why was the device you got right for your clinic?
So first of foremost, it was really about the relationship that I established with that company.
Yeah.
And, I had a lot of pressure from a couple of other companies to buy their device. And so I was a little bit prickly when looking for a device. But the good thing was that I was very upfront with this company and said, look, this has been my experience, and it is a significant financial investment. Kind of like, just don't be too full on, back off.
You almost sort of had like your guard up.
I absolutely, because I just thought, these companies are, it's their goal to sell you the device.
Yeah.
Okay, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No,
but
it's what they do.
I need to do what's right for me and my business. So that was really it for me, and just getting to know what they offer.
Yeah,
and
totally.
it was a progressive thing over several months.
Yeah, it was. And I guess I'll sort of tell a little bit of a story about what was happening basically at the same time is, I'd talked to lots of other companies and felt really sort of pressured, and obviously didn't go ahead. And then the company that you've gone with, I was actually so happy with them. I had such a good experience, and I was actually going to go ahead with the same device as you. And the company that I have purchased other devices from, it wasn't something that they had introduced yet, but it had been in the pipework for a really long time.
Yeah.
And they sort of knew that I wanted something when I opened this new clinic, but it probably wasn't going to be ready. So, you know, I'd been upfront with them that I was probably going to go with the same company as you, and that was all fine. And it was kind of crazy what happened, because I deliberated on it, you know, back and forth, and sort of, you know, tried it again, and, you know, contacted different companies and all of this. And then literally the day I'd woken up and gone, today I'm going to sign the contract for the device that you got, and I'm going to pay the deposit for the device that you got. I got a call from the company that I've purchased other devices from, and they said, it's ready.
Yeah.
And I said, oh my gosh, I'm literally on my internet banking.
Yeah.
About to, and if they listen, they'll probably be like, oh my gosh, like you're the one they'll be like, what? They knew. I was that close. And because I was so happy with my decision as well.
Yeah.
And I was that close to doing it. And so for me though, because I'd worked with this company already, and I felt so comfortable, and they'd fully, like, I think they sort of sped up their whole process to, you know, get this device ready for me. I probably put pressure on them, if anything, but I appreciated that they'd come to the table and they answered, you know, everything I wanted, the training, the inclusions, the support, you know, absolutely everything. And it made sense for me because I've already got a lot of their devices. So that was my decision. And then I was really open with the company that you've got. I was really open with them, saying this is why. They completely understood. And I also said, and this doesn't mean I'm not going to work with you in the future. I actually am, because there's other things that I'm really interested in your range. But for me, like you said, you know, at the start, there's other things that you want, but I'm going to have to really work towards that. But definitely when I'm at that point, there'll be no questions asked that I will be, you know, going with them.
And that's key. So it was about your relationship with the current company you've got your devices with, and that is it's really something just to, you know, when you're getting advice, ask people, you know, how are they going with their devices? What is the follow-up support? I mean, another example is a friend who purchased one of the higher end devices, and you know, it's not been doing that great lately. And you know, has she been impressed with that ongoing support? Not so much.
And that's a shame, and it's really kind of upsetting when you hear that as well. And whereas, you know, I felt like, you know, for both of us, those companies were kind of like running to the finish line with us and like really supporting us, and we've continued to have that support.
And you know, the company I've gone with, you know, they actually said to me, Chris, you don't need this. And it's like, so I don't need this $160,000 device. No, you need this and this. And that meant you know, less of a financial investment.
And it means initially, you can do other stuff with your business as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I really respected that.
Totally. So good. Next question. What is next for both of you with devices? We were talking about this while we were getting our coffee before we started.
I can't really give it away.
You can't give it away, but you're looking into should we say, another skin health device. And it's something that I have one of those brands of, and I absolutely love it. My patients love it. Can, you know, highly recommend getting one of those devices. But again, there's lots of options on the market. You know, I guess throwing some advice out there is there's, you know, people might think there's only one company doing this device, but there's actually quite a few companies doing this device. So again, shop around. For me, I think I have enough at the moment. My arm might be, you know, twisted when I go to the Beauty Expo this year, or, you know, end of
financial. When is that?
I want to say August.
Okay.
And by then, that'll give me a few months of being up and running here. But I think right now, especially with my recent purchase, I think I'm pretty happy. I've got
All
everything
bases
to
covered.
service my current client base. Obviously, in the future, there will be definitely more things in this rapidly changing industry as well. But for now, I think just really settling in with the devices that we've got, settling into this new clinic. But yeah, as I said, wait till I go to the beauty expo.
Yeah. I 2 more devices and I'll be happy.
2 more.
Yeah.
So CO2.
Well, no, CO2 is probably, a 2 to 3 year goal.
Yeah.
Maybe sooner. We'll see
Yeah.
what happens. LED is on the list.
It's on the
yeah,
cards.
of
Good.
course.
Highly
Yeah,
recommend.
absolutely.
Like I said, it's just the best add-on to any treatment. My patients just love having that relax time. They really look forward to it. They're like, I was looking forward to having this all day. And also, that anxious client as well, just pop them under after you've done their injectables or something like that. And it just really calms them down as well. It's
And a great value add.
a great value add. And also I get feedback that, people say that their recovery was a lot better as opposed to when I didn't have LED. So definitely recommend. How exciting. Watch this space.
Yeah, look out.
So good. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to episode 3 of this video podcast series. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. And a huge thank you to Chris for joining me today. That was such a good chat to have. And I really appreciate you coming and talking about these topics.
I really enjoyed it. And I hope we've been able to give you some insight into our journey. And certainly if you've got any questions, I'm happy for you to contact me directly, and I'm sure you're the same.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we'd both love to be able to help others out there who are in that deliberation phase.
Definitely.
Thanks so much. Bye.
All right, see you guys.
It's a wrap.